The Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, is unmasking waste and government corruption at an unprecedented rate. Here is just a little sample of what they've uncovered just this week alone. First, there was the USAID mismanagement, where DOGE targeted the U.S. Agency for International Development for closure after discovering massive corruption, citing long-standing accusations of financial mismanagement and corruption as the basis to investigate it. Among the things they found that were wrong with it was, for example, $10 million worth of meals reportedly sent to an Al-Qaeda-linked terrorist group, $5 million given to EcoHealth Alliance, which was involved in bat virus research at the Wuhan lab, $3.3 million for a project called Being LGBTQ in the Caribbean, $2 million for sex changes and LGBT activism in Guatemala, because why not? Then there was $1.5 million to promote job opportunities for LGBTQ+ individuals in Serbia, $425,000 to help Indonesian coffee companies become more climate and gender friendly. What? And $70,000 for a DEI musical in Ireland. And that's just the USAID alone. Then there was Medicare and Medicaid fraud. DOGE is probing the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, for potential fraud, with previous estimates suggesting wasteful spending in these programs totaling $100 billion. Then DOGE also discovered empty office space leases. They report that the General Services Administration, or the GSA, terminated 3 leases of mostly empty office space, saving $1.6 million. Then there was the concerns about ineffective spending. Then there was the improper payments. DOGE is investigating the government's payment systems, with previous reports indicating that $200 billion were sent out in overpayments in 2022 alone. And then, of course, who can forget the USAID's Sesame Street program in Peru? Gotta have it over there, right? Just another example of wasteful spending. There was also alleged instruction to always approve payments. DOGE is claiming that Treasury Payments Approval Officers were instructed to always approve payments regardless of their legitimacy. And that's not all. I haven't mentioned that on top of everything else, aside from the government sending money directly to news outlets, the feds also spent $1.8 billion in advertising in 2023 alone, which, by the way, was double what they had spent the year before. But good luck with the transparency there, as there is a, quote, debilitating lack of transparency in how federal advertising money is spent. We don't even know how much was going to social media or elsewhere. We just don't know. And if you ask me, this sounds like just another way for the government to peddle influence through the use of ad buys. See, if you want government to spend advertising dollars on you, you better do what they say. You better do what they want. Case in point, when we think of the social media outlets and all the censorship that we just endured the last 4 years. So this advertising program that the government is doing is ripe for corruption. And that's just this week alone. We're not even talking about the Trump freight train that's barreling down the tracks at 300 miles an hour, gobbling up the news cycle every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Now, clearly, the left, the big government types, the deep staters, and their allies in the media have all been caught completely blindsided by this overwhelming flow of news, which I find rather strange because Donald Trump was telegraphing that there was going to be shock and awe once he was re-inaugurated. But I'm supposing that people in places like Washington, D.C. couldn't imagine just how much Trump could adjust to their tactics at stymieing him in his first term. Part of the reason why he's a successful businessman. And for this, my friends, they are going to pay a heavy price. And so, all the freaking out, all the temper tantrums by the left have amounted to little more than white noise. Every time they complain about something, there's 10 new things mounting up that are taking the attention of everyone. The Trump team just marches right on, indefatigable, undeniably in control of their destiny at this point, which then takes us to the latest attempt at a roadblock to slow down DOGE and the Trump administration. This time by a judge, one Judge Colleen Cotelli, a U.S. District Court for D.C., who has issued a partial block in response to lawsuits by unions, including the SEIU, the AFGE, and the Alliance for Retired Americans. Her ruling against DOGE effectively limits access for DOGE. Operatives are now barred from the Treasury payment systems, except for 2 special government employees, Tom Krause, who's the Cloud Software Group CEO, and Marco Iles, which is SpaceX engineer. These two retain a read-only access. They are also required to do no modifications to systems or data. But the scope of this ruling applies only to the Treasury's Bureau of Fiscal Service Systems, and not other agencies like the USAID or DOL. But all that being said, when we look at the ruling, we find that this doesn't really stop Elon Musk and DOGE at all. The ruling, while it does impose targeted restrictions, does not halt DOGE's broader agenda. And because Krause and Iles can still audit Treasury data, albeit in a limited capacity, they'll continue trucking on. And DOGE retains their influence over the USAID, the CMS, OPM, and others. So it continues. And really, as long as the Trump administration and the GOP lawmakers continue to back DOGE's mission, it's going to continue. And that takes us to the present. Based on recent reports, the Department of Education appears to be next on the chopping block for Elon Musk. In fact, there are already approximately 20 DOGE representatives who are in the Department of Education. They're at the headquarters in Washington, D.C., and they are seeking access to information systems and agency records, and they are looking to cut spending and staff. President Trump, too, is reportedly preparing an executive order aimed at dismantling the Education Department. According to reports, the draft order would direct the agency to begin diminishing itself, acknowledging that only Congress can fully shut down the department, but they're going to render it effectively dead. And of course, the long-term goal will be to get Congress to eliminate the Department of Education altogether, fulfilling another one of Trump's campaign promises. Now, as you can imagine, Democrats don't like this, and they're demanding details on DOGE's access to education. They don't like him being in the Education Department, and they have cited concerns about the handling of sensitive data, which, by the way, this seems to be the move that they are doing to try and delegitimize what is happening. Like, oh, people's sensitive data, sensitive data. Like the government doesn't already have all your sensitive data, and considering how leak-friendly they are, I mean, what you going to do, right? This is an article from K-12 Dive titled Democratic Leaders Demand Details on DOGE's Access to Education Department. They write, Democrat leaders in Congress want acting U.S. Secretary of Education Denise Carter to provide a range of information to confirm the Education Department is ensuring continuity of programs and that safeguards are in place to protect student privacy, according to a letter sent Wednesday. Citing the Education Department's status as a target of President Donald Trump and his advisors, quote, since even prior to his inauguration, the group of 5 senators and representatives highlight media reports that the department could face actions similar to those at the U.S. Agency for Internal National Development. They don't want any cuts. They want the pig trough to continue. This letter was signed by Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, Senator Patty Murray of Washington, Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, Bobby Scott of Virginia, Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut. These are the ones who were expressing their concerns about what's happening in the Department of Education. Oh no! And in this letter, they are complaining that workers have been placed on leave for attending diversity trainings promoted by former Education Secretary Betsy DeVos or whatever, who served during Trump's first term and have been, quote, coerced into leaving their jobs via buyouts offered to all federal workers. Essentially, we don't want people in there who are going to promote DEI in the Department of Education. You don't need that propaganda put on children. The letter espouses concern that according to a Washington Post story, DOGE staff had federal data, including personal, identifiable information and sensitive internal financial data into artificial intelligence software to target cuts at the department. If these reports are true, they raise profound questions about highly confidential data is being used and by whom, said the Director of Equity in Civic Technology at the Center for Democracy and Technology. Man, that is a title. Equity in Civic Technology, meaning DEI, meaning racism. Elizabeth, the Director of Equity in Civic Technology at the Center of Democracy, wrote, dumping large amounts of sensitive data, including personally identifiable information like social security numbers and family income into a general use AI system significantly increases security risks. We haven't seen any proof that this kind of use is safe and trustworthy. The letter goes on to write, we will not stand by and allow the impact that dismantling the Department of Education, this shining jewel of educational power and prowess that we brought upon ourselves, which, by the way, our education system is garbage. You don't need the Department of Education. What are we talking about? Back to the states it should go, and it looks like it will. Anyway, I digress. Congress, the letter reads, created the department to ensure all students in America have equal access to high-quality education. Let me retranslate that. Access to the lowest quality education, because that's essentially what it did, and that their civil rights are protected no matter the zip code. How about allowing school choice? Why do we need a federal agency to dictate the education of our children in the U.S.? The letter comes one day after Representative Susan Bonamici, Democrat of course, introduced a House resolution condemning actions to defund public education or to weaken or dismantle the education department. And of course, the condemnation will go nowhere because the Democrat Party has no power. Which brings me back to the final point here. No matter how much the Democrat leaders bleat and moan, they have no real power to stop the Trump administration. And as long as the American people continue to stand behind the president, this cascade, this flurry of activity from the Trump team dismantling the deep state will only continue and increase in speed.